So yeah, the general overview of the passenger side engine compartment. You're gonna check the hoses, clamps, and wires. You check all of those, okay? And then you're gonna check the alternator. So you're working top to bottom, okay? You can check the alternator, make sure that's properly mounted and secured. That is belt driven, so you have to say it's belt driven, okay? And you're gonna make sure the belt itself is not ripped, torn, frayed, or dry rotted. And it should not have more than 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch of play. So you would actually take that belt and you would pull it and make sure it doesn't have more than that. Okay, the water pump is down here. You're gonna check the water pump. The water pump is gear driven. You have to say that. Okay, you're gonna check the water pump, make sure it's properly mounted and secure. It's not visibly damaged. It's not leaking. All right. All right, so that is the engine compartment there. And now you would move on to the suspension, brakes, and tire systems. Okay, so the suspension system is gonna start right here with the frame. Okay, it's gonna start with the frame. So what we say about the frame is make sure it's not cracked, it's not damaged, there's no illegal welds on the frame. Okay, from there we're gonna move on to the suspension hanger. Okay, you're gonna make sure that's properly mounted and secured. It's not missing any bolts. Anytime you can see visible bolts, you wanna say, you make sure it's not missing any bolts. Okay, from there, inside this spring hanger, attached to the leaf spring, is also a bushing inside there. That is a rubber bushing, so you wanna make sure it's not ripped, torn, or frayed. Okay, then you're gonna move on to the leaf spring. Okay, leaf spring, it's not cracked, damaged, there's no missing springs. Okay, you see that there? All right, from there it's going to move on. So this is the progression of it. You're moving on from the start all the way down. Okay, you're going to check your U-bolts. Okay, make sure those aren't damaged in any way. Make sure those are secure. Okay, that's what connects the suspension to the axle. Okay, you're going to check that. And then back here we have the shock absorber. Okay, we're going to make sure that's properly mounted and secured. Okay, it's not missing any bolts. It's not visibly damaged in any way. Okay, then that is the suspension system. Okay, next up we got the brake system. So this here is the brake chamber. Make sure that's not visibly damaged, it's properly mounted and secured, and it's not leaking, because that does hold air in the brake chamber. Okay, the brake chamber is supplied with air through the brake line. Okay, so you have to mention the brake line. That is a hose, so you want to make sure it's not ripped, torn, frayed, dry rotted. Okay, it's not leaking, clamps are tight. Okay, there's a, I forgot to mention, there was a clamp on the brake chamber. You want to make sure that's tight. Okay, the slack adjuster and the push rod are in the front of the brake chamber. Now what you have to say with that is you have to say, the way I would check my slack adjuster is I would go into the truck, I would take the brakes off, make sure it's in the lowest gear so the truck doesn't roll. Or if you're in automatic, what you would do is you would actually chock the wheels, okay, so the truck doesn't roll. And then you would come out here and you would pull on that slack adjuster and make sure that it doesn't have more than 1 inch of play, 1 inch of travel on the slack adjuster. You do have to say that on the test to get credit for the slack adjuster. Okay. All right, now farther down here, okay, you're gonna see the brake drum. Okay, you're gonna check the brake drum and you're gonna check the brake lining. Okay, so the brake drum, you're gonna make sure it's not cracked, it's not damaged, there's no contaminants in the brake drum. You're going to check the brake lining. There's a specific thing you have to say about the brake lining, and that is you're going to check and make sure it's not worn dangerously thin. Okay, so make sure you say that to get credit for it. All right, and that's the brake system. All right, so next up we have the tire. Okay, so you're going to check the inner and the outer wall of the tire. You're going to make sure that there's no bubbles, cuts, or abrasions on the tire that you can visibly see. Okay, the tire tread, okay, has to be 4/32 of an inch. Okay, that is different than the tires in the back, but this front steer tire has to be 4/32 of an inch. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're checking that with the tire depth gauge. Okay, so you want to say that, and then you want to say you're making sure that it's not unevenly worn, the tread. You want to make sure the tread is evenly worn. You want to make sure there's no bald spots in the tread. So you're checking the condition of the tread. All right, moving on out here. So you're gonna check the rim. Okay, you're gonna check the rim, make sure the rim's not visibly damaged, it's not cracked, and there's no illegal welds. So you say no illegal welds about the frame and about the rim, okay? So you're gonna check the lug nuts. Okay, make sure they're tight, make sure none are missing. You want to make sure on the thread that there's no shiny metal. Okay, that would indicate a misthreaded lug nut. Okay,
Loose, right?
what's that?
It could be loose.
It could be loose, yeah. Now, if you see a rust trail running down on these lug nuts, that's another way you could see that this is loose. Okay, if you do see rust trails, that could indicate that the stud itself is actually rusting out from behind. Okay, you definitely want to make sure that that's not rusting running down. Okay, now this is your hub. You want to make sure your hub is sealed. Okay, it's not leaking. That's a big one with the hub. You want to make sure the hub is not leaking. Okay, this is filled with oil. Okay, you want to make sure it's not missing any bolts. Make sure it's properly mounted and secured. It's not visibly damaged. Now this is the hub seal. Okay, this little black part right here. Okay, the way you would check that is, you have to say this on the test. You would take that off, you would put your finger in there, and you would check to make sure there's oil. Now, I don't really suggest you do that. I would let a mechanic do that, but really the most important thing is, I mean, even not just for CDL, but when you become a driver yourself, always do your pre-trip and check to make sure there's no oil leaking out of that seal.
So you're
Okay.
safe if you see
Yeah,
oil.
this can get hot enough while you're running that it can catch fire. So it's really important that you check and make sure there's no oil running on any of your tires. This one in particular, though, on your front. The other ones in the back are sealed. This one is not sealed. Okay. All right. So next thing you're going to check is, this one's easy to forget too, depending on where the wheel is. If this valve stem is right up top, very easy to remember. But if it's down below, it's going to be easy to forget. So you want to make sure you don't forget that. Okay, because this is when you're going to say, okay, I'm going to check the valve stem, but this is when you're going to say, I'm going to check the inflation of the tire. You have to check the inflation of the tire. So I'm going to check the valve stem. I'm going to make sure that's it's metal with a metal cap. And I'm going to check the tire pressure with the tire pressure gauge. Okay, you have to say that. Okay, that's it.